Walt Disney used to say that all this was started by a mouse. In our situation with Sam and Ehud Netzer and the discoveries, it really was started by a little girl playing with a monkey on a TV show. Sam saw this show from Israel about wildlife, and there was a little girl playing with a monkey on it, and he asked his nephew Victor in Israel to find out who the little girl was, but then later changed that to find out who the organization was that was depicted in this wildlife show. Victor did some research and put him in touch with a man named Yossi Leshem, but Yossi ultimately put Sam in touch with Ehud Netzer when he found out that Sam was also interested in not just wildlife in Israel, but archaeology. So over the period of years from I think the 80s on, Sam would help fund Netzer's exploration. When Sam passed away and the board took over, the estate and the trust, one of our mandates was to provide funds for archaeological exploration in Israel. So in looking around, Barry Ernstoff, our trustee in Jerusalem, suggested that we get a hold of Ehud Netzer and look at what he had in the way of projects to fund. Netzer basically said that I've got plenty of money, I've done all my excavation, what I need is money to print and publish what I've done, because if it doesn't get published, then it's like I never did any of the work. So we partnered with several other organizations so that the Professor Netzer could publish the work that he did on the Hasmonean and Herodian palaces at Jericho. They were wonderful, beautiful publications, and in 2002 they won the Frank Cross Moore Award, which is a very prestigious award for archaeological study.
So that must have made you feel good.
That made him feel excellent. This was a very, very prestigious thing, and having been a part of it was exciting. That was the initial project that we had with Professor Netzer. Subsequent to that, in about 2008, the trustees made a decision to take a trip to Israel, and we actually met Professor Netzer at his site, the archaeological site at Herodium. And Herodium was King Herod's, had a palace, but then also a fortress. And it was like the lower part of the palace part was down below. It had pools, it had bathhouses, it had living quarters. It was like a country club for the king. He gave us a wonderful tour. We started out down below at the lower part, and he described the palace and the pools and what was there. And also the fact that some of the stones from up above had ended up in some of the structures below many, many, many years after Herod. They were just reusing the stones from up above. If you look up the hill, you could see that the mountain was very conical, but you couldn't see very much of the fortress. So he gave us a tour of that, and then we went up to the top of the mountain. And from the outside, you wouldn't really know that there was a fortress there because the mountain just was covered with dirt, with, rubble and dirt all the way to the top. We got to the top, and then you peer down into the round center like a volcano, except that it was a structure. And there was a north tower that had been truncated. It probably rose, I think the professor said it rose another 75 feet from where it was when we saw it. And then there were rooms that you could see. There was one area that was a synagogue. There was another domed room made out of a stone domed room that was like a bathhouse, a hot room they called it.
Which, according to Josephus, it was the most elaborate building ever built. And we shall go down by a system of tunnels from days of Bar Kokhba, from the Second Jewish Revolt, in the days of Hadrian, 2nd century, where the hill was already partially destroyed, but it was good enough for the Jewish border to come and hope to resist the Romans. And they built these tunnels, we believe, in order to have secret outlets on the slope of the hill, so if the Romans come up, they run quickly through the tunnels to the right location and surprise the Romans. Now it's integrated with water cisterns from Herodes, one which we shall see immediately when we go down, and two more when we go out. And because these people of Bar Kokhba didn't want the Romans to know that they are working here, they, instead of pouring the dirt that was created by digging the tunnels, they filled the cisterns nearly to the top. So we shall see, we'll go through Bar Kokhba tunnels, and we'll see the water cisterns, and when we go out, we'll see the tomb.
And then there was an entrance in the North Tower down into these tunnels. And the professor explained that these tunnels really were dug, for the most part, by the revolutionaries, the Jewish revolutionaries during the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Jews took the fortress and they dug tunnels for a couple of reasons. First, they had tunnels that went to cisterns where they'd bring water in so that they could survive during a siege. And then they dug tunnels even farther down that came out in lower parts of the mountain so that they could go out and do sneak attacks on the Romans that were sieging them by surprise.
We are in a water system whose floor is about 20 feet below us, and it was filled while digging the tunnels. And this is we call it intermediate system. They filled it with water from the lower systems, which were assembled by the rain, and through the hole under the stairs, they could always take water straight to the palace. And from here on, until we come to the next system, we go in a tunnel made by Bar Kokhba warriors.
We walked down into the center of the fortress and looked at several rooms in there. There was a beautiful dome room, all put together with the rocks in a dome formation, and then out into the daylight. And that's where the professor took us to an area that had been fenced off from the general public. He had started excavating at Herodium in about 1973. He had uncovered these tunnels. He had excavated a lot of the ruins there. He always believed that this place was where Herod's final resting place was, where his tomb was. But he could never find it. But just shortly before we arrived, he did find what he believed to be Herod's tomb. And he took us there. Again, it was not open to the public, and also it had not been announced. And he took us along this scaffolding, and we went to a place on the side of the mountain that he had done excavation where he had discovered the base and a lot of the carved cornices, all in pieces, big stones, all in pieces on the ground, that were pieces of the mausoleum of Herod. When it was constructed, he said it was about 35 meters tall, which is over 100 feet tall. And what he did was that he had this mountain, and at the top of the mountain he had created this fortress, and on the side of the mountain he created this mausoleum for himself. When he did that, a part of the construction, he took people and they took dirt and covered up the fortress so that the only thing visible from a distance would be his mausoleum. You wouldn't see the fortress. And that's what exists today, except the mausoleum has been torn down.
We are on the monument itself. There was a room in the middle we don't know much about, but definitely it had few stories. Our architect now making the drawings, how it looked, and it was about between 20 and 25 meter high. And we know the base is 10 by 10 meters, and while going up and while standing here you can see many architectural elements of design, and this is a key to the restoration because the classic style is very organized one, and once you have one or two stones you can build the whole pattern. So this is what can be done at the moment only on the paper. This is an outlet from one of the Bar Kokhba tunnels. Here we came in 1975, and it had a second story where we are standing, and we didn't know anything about. And on the other hand, this building was destroyed already in Herod's day before they started to build the artificial inn.
Now it had been destroyed, but you could clearly see the base of it. You could clearly see large stones that had been carved, had been part of the crown of the mausoleum. It was amazing. You're looking back 2,000 years of history. It was sitting right in front of you, and you could see what was going on. It was a phenomenal experience, an amazing experience. We could look down on the valley floor, see where the palace was. There was a large straight area where there was a bunch of olive trees planted in very, very straight lines. And he explained that was the area for his funeral processional, for Herod's funeral processional. It had been subsequently planted with trees, but that's where the parade for his funeral was going to be.
Is our main source to this period. Described the funeral. He didn't describe the tomb, but he described the funeral. How the whole army, units from abroad and local, marched in rows. It could be 10,000 people or more. So this, I think there is no doubt, no one ever put since then a question mark, that this was made for the funeral. So this was the beginning of the search for the tomb.
We went to some other projects we had done, and we saw a lot of good things that we had accomplished, and we also interviewed people for a new project, potential new projects. We came home. In the meantime, Professor Netzer was working on unearthing more and more of the tomb, and then tragically, in 2010, he fell off of one of the scaffolds and he died. We were all, I think, pretty broken up because we had met him, we knew him, we had helped him create the publication of his first books. He had shared with us his new discovery that before anyone else had heard about it. So when it came time to publish the book about the discovery, the Samis Foundation approached the Israel Exploration Society and said, because of our relationship with Professor Netzer, we would like to fund the publication of the book concerning the Herod's discovery by ourselves. We put up all the money to fund the last volume of Professor Netzer's works on the Hasmonean and Herodian palaces at Jericho, and we put up the funds to publish the 2 volumes of Herodium, including the discovery of Herod's tomb. And in fact, the final volume of the Jericho palaces has been published, and the first volume of the Herodian discovery is in publication now and should be published very soon. The follow-up then was that we were informed by the Israel Museum in Jerusalem that they were taking these stones. These were the stones that were part of the mausoleum and the part of the tomb. And they were creating an exhibit in the Israel Museum of Herod's tomb. And we went there again to Israel in 2012. And they were actually working on the creation of this exhibit.
This I'm showing you the reconstruction of his throne room in Jericho from Sylvia's book. This was a 5-meter by 4-meter room, all covered with frescoes, floor to ceiling, and the ceiling itself also molded in stucco and fresco. And we are reconstructing that room, the whole room, on 1-to-1 scale. And we brought from the site all the elements that were found around the tomb and reconstructed them here according to Rachel's drawings, and then with alterations and changes. And on top of that small wall, this little stone is going to ride, this architrave, and on top of all that, there'll be the whole entablature of the building on top of the columns. This ornate thing that you see here, we'll see it downstairs later. So this is just the inner room. Can you see that on the floor, we drew the border line of the room, of that rounded room, and one of the sarcophagi that we found.
And they had decided that they would make it the last journey, they call it the last journey. So they started in his palace in Jericho, and there was a room in that palace where he died, a royal room they called it, but that's where he died. And they were going to make the exhibit show this last journey, starting from the room in which he died, and then the procession, which is, they said it was about 40 kilometers, to Herodium, and showing parts and pieces and artifacts along the way. And finally, the tomb itself and the mausoleum that he had created itself.
We thought that we'd talk only about the tomb and the new discoveries in Herodium, but as Sylvia and I were developing the concept of the exhibition, we realized that you can't talk about a person's death and tomb without talking about his life. So we decided to begin the exhibition with Herod's death in Jericho. You know, he died in his palace of Jericho, and the funeral actually began in Jericho and went all the way up to Herodium, which is about a 40-kilometer walk.
They took us behind the scenes in the Israel Museum, and the curators of the exhibit took us into these sealed rooms and showed us the work that they were doing in putting this exhibit together. They had taken the royal room in the palace at Jericho where Herod died and taken the room was frescoed. There was plastered with paintings on the wall, and there were special colors and so on. And they had found much of this, and they were piecing it together. And there were long tables full of little tiny pieces of plaster with colors on them from the wall, and they were piecing them together like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Fascinating, amazing work.
That royal room was excavated just right after the tomb was found, and Ehud actually called the team of our team to assist immediately upon the discovery of this room, because they realized immediately that the walls of the room are covered in fresco, or secco in that case. That is, when the plaster is painted, the dry plaster is painted, and the upper part of the walls was molded in stucco. So the team of this lab joined the excavators, and the room was excavated together, and immediately upon exposure, the remains were treated at the site. And therefore the room is much better preserved than like in normal exhibitions. What Andrea and Connie are doing here is working on the upper part of that room. So this is a photo from sort of midways of the excavation. You can see
This is that.
Exactly. This is the room. It's a 6 by 7 meters room, and it's preserved to 5.5 meters height, which is extraordinary in archaeology. It never happens this way. It's sort of a country club, a royal country club. Swimming pools, bathhouses, lavish rooms, and we now know a small theater, a royal theater with a royal room at the top of it. And that royal room was excavated just right after the tomb was found. And
They showed us actual casket that was made of stone that Herod and his two wives, there were 3 caskets altogether, that they had pieced together. And these caskets had been destroyed to rubble by the Jews when they took over the fortress, because they hated Herod so much that anything that had to do with them, they just destroyed it. And they had actually pieced together substantial portions of this casket, stone, made out of stone, and those pieces that they couldn't find, they plastered in so that you had 3 caskets of stone. The one that Herod was in a specific rose-colored marble that is not used usually for carving or for this type of thing. So they figured that this was his. They showed us a magnificent, I'll call it a bowl, but it was a huge marble bowl that was probably used as a fountain, with faces on the outside and handles that they had discovered. And this type of marble is not found in Israel, but they had found a bowl just like this in Augustus Caesar's palace, and they're surmising that this was a gift from Augustus Caesar to Herod, and it was just a magnificent piece. We were in this room that had shelves and shelves and shelves of artifacts. It was a thrilling experience, a really thrilling experience.
this phenomenal basin, marble basin we should say, is a unique find. Actually, you know that in Herod's time there is no marble, almost no marble at all. No marble in his buildings or marble objects. And as Ehud was excavating in Herodium, more and more pieces of marble were found. Can you see those 2 phenomenal heads of Silene here? They were not discovered together. One of them was discovered in one of the seasons. About 7 years later, the other one appeared. And Ehud thought there were 2 handles of one jar until Sylvia unfortunately visited Rome to find out that Augustus himself had a similar crater at his house. And these 2 joined into one handle, and the whole thing is a huge crater, most probably given to Herod as a personal gift from Augustus. So we collected all the marble pieces 8 years ago and brought them into the lab, and the lab here joined and restored and reconstructed the whole thing into one piece.
The exhibit opened in January of 2013 and is open to the public, of course, and it is a very dramatic exhibit of King Herod and his death and his final resting place. Samis has talked with the curators of the museum about possibly partnering with other organizations here in Seattle to bring the exhibit to Seattle if possible. It's a huge undertaking and a very expensive thing. It would be something that would go on, let's say, at the Seattle Center, like the King Tut exhibit. It would be monumental. It would be phenomenal if we could do it, but that's sort of a long shot. Ehud Netzer's dream was to recreate it on site, the original mausoleum, 100 feet tall, coned roof, columns, caskets, on site. Whether that happens or not, there's a lot of politics involved, and it may not. But the museum is talking about putting things back to where they were. We funded two major works. They were about $300,000 each. But what we received and what the world received was a monumental discovery of enormous proportion. And having been a part of that makes me very proud, and I think it makes our trustees and our foundation proud to have been such an integral part of that.